Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Samfiru Tumarkin live employment law show on Facebook and YouTube. My name is Sandy Chen. I'm an employment and disability lawyer at our firm's Vancouver office. For everybody that's tuning in from Metro Vancouver, I hope you're all staying safe with all the snow we're getting. I'll be here for the next half an hour or so, answering your questions live. Anything and everything to do with employment law or disability law. So if you're having issues at work with your boss, if you're having issues with a contract, or if you're being bullied and harassed at work, issues of discrimination, if you're struggling with some sort of medical condition at work, please feel free to just type your question into the box in front of you, and then I'll be able to see it on my screen here, and I'll do my best to answer any and all questions. I know that we've seen, a popular topic these days is the issue of severance, right? We've seen a lot of mass layoffs from some big companies recently in the last year, and unfortunately, it looks like we might be seeing some more this year. So severance pay is a fairly popular topic, and it's a question I get asked a lot. So if anybody has any issues, with termination or severance or anything like that, we can talk about it on here, or if anybody wants to talk to me privately, you can contact me as well. I'm happy to schedule a more private conversation to speak with you. Another topic I wanted to talk about today was it has to do with severance pay to some extent, but I wanted to talk about changes in your job that's kind of imposed on you by the company, right? And the reason is I've seen a few things come in this week, which were a bit interesting. I've talked to a few people this week, which are a bit interesting. So I wanted to touch on that topic of whether it's legal, illegal, to what extent can an employer change your job. And so I think if anybody's struggling with that issue, let me know, and we can talk more about it. But I would say generally, most changes to a job you have to look at the degree of the change, right? A 1% pay cut could be okay, but a 50% pay cut is definitely not okay, right? Another one I've seen this week is a company trying to change an employee's place of work, right? If it's just down the road, right, you're at an office, they're moving to an office a block away, that's probably fine. But if they're moving you from Vancouver to Prince George, that's likely illegal, right? And so these significant changes to your jobs, the company cannot impose on you. I think that's the one key point I'm trying to convey here. And there's things you can do to kind of try to fix the situation. But at the end of the day, if it's something that you're not willing to accept, there are ways that you can try to there is a certain path where you can take to end your employment and just seek your severance pay, right? And I think this is it's such an incredibly important topic because there's changes to someone's job all the time, right? Your hours may change, right? Your duties and responsibilities may change, and so it's important to kind of know your rights when the company is changing your job in a way you don't particularly like, right? Obviously, if you're getting a promotion, that's a good thing, but if you're being demoted, then there's a question of whether the company's allowed to do that. So we got a few questions here coming in. First question's from Derek. So Derek, you say you were just let go for restructuring. You were working a modified job after having a heart attacks. your employer took it away 9 months later, then let me go. Is there information you can provide to help me? Yeah, Derek. So I see a few things in your situation. So I guess number one is this issue of accommodation, right? Um, in Canada, each province has a human rights code. In BC, it's the BC Human Rights Code, and in there there's something that prohibits employers from discriminating against someone on the basis of disability. Right? Could be a physical disability, could be mental health related. Um, a flu is probably not considered a disability, but let's say you have depression, or you've broken your arm or something like that, where you have chronic pain. That's a disability, right? And so the employer, if you have a disability, they have a duty to accommodate that, right? They can't just fire you and say, well, you're injured, you're not going to work here anymore. And so in your case, I mean, it sounds like they were accommodating to some extent by modifying your job duties so that you could do it. Um, the question, the unknown in your case, is why did they take it away, right? And is the restructuring really just a cover up for the real reason they're letting you go, which is because they don't want to accommodate you anymore because it costs them too much money or it's inconvenient for them, right? And so I think, Derek, in your case, you do have recourse through a human rights complaint. That's something you could pursue, and that could lead to compensation, or even in some cases reinstatement, right? Um, and obviously, Derek, in your case, if you're non-unionized, there's the issue of your severance pay. Restructuring is not a way to get out of paying severance pay, right? It's probably one of the most common reasons for employees being let go is this term restructuring. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in your case, there's definitely a lot going on, and there's at least two things that should be explored, right? The human rights issue and the severance pay issue. Um, Got another question here from Elizabeth. Can an employer make you take a position that you don't want? So Elizabeth, that's a good question. It's kind of related to the earlier topic I was talking about employers making changes to your job. So I guess the general answer is no, right? You certainly, if you have a certain position within the company and they're trying to put you into this other position, which is completely different, right? Or for whatever reason you don't want it, you don't have to take it, right? But the issue is, if you're non-unionized, nothing stops the company from letting you go because you didn't take that new position, right? Now they have to pay you severance, right? And severance could be, upwards of 24, 25, 26 months, depending on, your age, length of service, and the nature of your position. So they still have to pay you severance, but there's nothing, unfortunately, stopping them from letting you go if you reject that position that they want you to take. Okay, we got more questions coming in. Got a question from MP. Can a staff member request noise cancellation headphones to navigate around noise around the workspace, and you're in Ontario in an office environment? So I mean, that's an interesting question. I can't say I've ever dealt with that issue, but I will say that if the staff member does not have any sort of disability, right? You've got a perfectly healthy person who just wants noise cancellation headphones for whatever reasons, maybe to focus on their work or whatever. You don't have a duty to get those headphones for him or her, right? To pay for that and give it to them. Now, that's your legal duty. If it helps them be more productive or whatever, maybe it is a good idea. I don't know. If there's something that's and the reason I'm bringing the person's health into this is if they have some sort of condition, medical condition, and I can't say what the condition might be, but if they had some sort of condition where they need those headphones to do their job because they're just more susceptible to noise or whatever it is, you may have a duty to accommodate that person's medical condition and pay some money for these headphones and give it to them, right? The classic example is somebody's got back issues. You've got to get them an ergonomic chair, right? And in most cases, that's something reasonable, a reasonable accommodation that the employer probably has to pay for. And so those principles, that example of the chair and the back issue, it applies probably in this situation, right? Although in your question, you're saying they're using it to navigate around noise around the workspace. I'm interested to hear about what the deal is there and why they need these headphones to navigate around noise in the workplace. Okay, another question. Oh, and just know if anybody has follow-up questions, feel free to just put them in there, and I'll get them in to them in order. Because sometimes I know that there are follow-up questions, and I'm happy to answer them. So next question from Bimal. Your company changed your sales role unilaterally, reduced your sales potential in 50%. So it's reflected in a 50% less commissions. Also, they are forcing employees to break vacation in 2 periods, forcing to quit. Yeah, Bimal, so this is related to the topic I started with, this issue of can they make changes, right? Your case, I've seen quite a few times. It's not uncommon in sales roles, at least from my perspective, that they're changing your structure, right? And I think in the situation, it depends on a few things. So number one is, does your employment contract with the company allow them to change your commission structure whenever they want, right? Because some of the people I see, they get a new structure every year, and some years are a bit more favorable than others. And so that's I guess that's the first unknown. If not, right, if your contract says, here's your commission structure, and this is kind of an indefinite basis, and now they're coming in and now they're saying, we're changing it, and it's probably going to result in 50% less earnings or less commissions for you. That could be a case for what's called constructive dismissal, right? Where an employer's fundamentally and unilaterally changed a term of your employment, and which entitles the employee to say, I don't accept this, I'm quitting, and you're going to pay me severance, right? Something along those lines. And so my advice to someone in your situation, Bimal, is before you quit or before you do anything to respond, you should speak with an employment lawyer to see if you have, because there's always nuances, right? And so you should get your contract, get your commission plans, speak to an employment lawyer. If you're in BC, I'm happy to talk to you, because there's the general rule is if you're cutting someone's pay by more than 15 or 20%, it's probably something that entitles the employee to quit and claim for severance pay, right? Now there's details that matter, but that's kind of the general rule. So yeah, well, before you do anything to respond or quit or do anything like that, talk to a lawyer for some legal advice, just to get the nuances of your situation there. In terms of the second part of your question, they're forcing employees to break vacation in 2 periods. I don't see an issue with that. I mean, the employer has, I mean, if they don't want to let you take your 3 weeks all at once, they're allowed to do that, right? If they want you to break your 3 weeks into 2 different ones, that's fine. There are certain rules regarding the minimum block for vacation. So the employer can't just make you take 1 day here and 1 day there. I believe, depends on what province you're in. I believe in BC it's a week block they have to give you. But I'd have to double check that. But in principle, I mean, forcing you to break your vacation in 2 periods, I don't think that's that's nothing that the employer is not allowed to do. But obviously, in your situation, the pay cut is the bigger issue here. Okay, we got a lot more questions just going down the list. Next question from Fred, 65. You worked 11 years in skilled trade. How much severance are you entitled to? How do they calculate weekly pay since you are working 54 hours per week? Yeah, Fred, that's it's a good question. So for severance pay, it's not a science, it's not a math, it's not a calculator you plug in your age and length of service to, and then out comes a magic number. It's usually a range, right? I mean, the people have heard the rule of thumb, a month per year of service. Not accurate, but it's sometimes a good starting place. For you, I mean, just because you're so close to retirement and because you're advanced age, that's probably going to play a big factor, right? So if you were, let's say, 40 years old, I would say maybe around 11 months. But because you're 65, the law presumes, whether right or wrong, it's going to be harder for you to find a new job. And so you could be looking at more than 11 or 12 months for severance. The main caveat I'll put on that, and this applies to everybody, but sometimes your employment contract that you signed, I guess in Fred, in your case, 11 years ago, it may have a term in there that says, if we let you go, here's how much severance we'll pay you, right? And so that always comes into play. I find the best situation for employees is if you don't have a written contract, or if you do, it doesn't have anything saying we're going to limit your severance to X amount, right? And so, Fred, I think for you, I mean, no, without knowing much more about your situation, I'm thinking 11, 12 months, maybe more. Again, subject to the contract issue. Your weekly pay, you've been working 54 hours per week. So your severance should be calculated, right? So for example, if your severance pay is 12 months pay, that should be calculated based on 54 hours per week, right? Assuming that's how much you've worked for the past little while, right? And that's just not like a week here, a week there, where you're working that much. So I mean, there's a lot of other details about severance pay I won't get into here, but there are certain things which could serve to reduce your severance or increase your severance, right? If you're not healthy when they let you go, you could get more severance. If the big one is if you find a new job soon after you've been let go, your severance could be dramatically reduced. There's all these things that come into play. But in general, Fred, I mean, I think for you, let's say 11 or 12 months. But again, to my earlier point, you should speak with an employment lawyer privately about your specific situation. They'll be able to give you a much better sense. Okay, so we've got more questions here. Sylvie's saying, given a letter for unknown period for layoff, you would get a call in a as we need basis after 3 weeks. Should I apply for EI? Consider as termination. Yeah. So Sylvie, it's a good question. So a layoff is a temporary layoff, or as you call it, unknown period for layoff, is permitted in very limited circumstances. The general rule is if you're placed on a temporary layoff, you can consider that a termination and claim for severance, right? Some limited situations where layoffs allow, the one that comes to mind is if your contract says they're allowed to put you on a layoff, right? A temporary layoff, and it cannot exceed 13 weeks in BC. That's the maximum layoff period. Certain industries allow temporary layoffs just because, if you're in seasonal work, or maybe if you're on construction projects and that you're going to get a layoff at a certain point. But again, they're very limited circumstances. So in your case, Sylvie, if they put you on a layoff, it's you could probably consider as a termination if you want. Again, before I give you a definite answer, just I need a few more details about your situation. But in general, yeah, a temporary layoff is the same thing as a termination if you want it to be, right? Obviously, you could accept the layoff and keep your employment and wait for the recall. Should you apply for EI? Yes, yeah, you should apply for EI because it's an involuntary layoff, right? You didn't quit. Yeah, I would if you're thinking of not wanting to go back and you want to consider it to be a termination, I would speak to an employment lawyer right away and see if that's viable in your case. I will say in most cases, in most cases like yours, right, it is a viable case. Okay. So MP, I think you're following up on your earlier question of the noise cancellation headphones. And you're saying it's based on ability to focus only, office environment. Yeah, I mean, if they don't have any special need, or if they don't have a medical condition, I don't see why the company would have to pay for those headphones, right? I mean, I have noise canceling headphones here that I paid for myself. So I would inquire maybe a bit more with the employee and just see what, is there something, does he have a certain need for these headphones that, what's he struggling with, right? Ramona is asking, she's worked for a business same business for 5+ years. Recently terminated, told that the business was being shut down. You found out the business was not shut down and still in business. Is this legal to do this? What can I do about this? Yeah, Ramona, it's so yeah. If you're non-unionized, they're allowed to let you go, right? But what's potentially illegal in your situation is that they lie to you. And when an employer lies about the reason for termination, generally judges and courts don't like that. They might award you extra compensation for that in addition to your severance. So what can you do about it? It sounds like you can certainly file a wrongful dismissal lawsuit against your ex-employer, and you can seek severance pay and potentially extra compensation because they lied to you about it, right? Or they lied about the reason. Now, if they have a legitimate explanation that they were shutting down when they let you go, and then it turns out business picked back up and they weren't shutting down, that might be a different story. So we got another question here from Alvin. You're asking, employees constantly disobeying superior orders, making fake complaints, how to deal with the issue. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a few things you can do. I mean, you could start off by giving them progressive discipline, right? Verbal warning, written warning, and then a final warning, right? I'm not saying this is the way. I mean, there's different ways to go about it, but final warning, and then the final warning will say, if you keep being insubordinate, disobeying direct orders, next time we're going to let you go for cause, right? That's one way to go about it. If you just don't want them around anymore and you don't want to go through the progressive discipline, if they're non-unionized, you can let them go anytime, right? And just pay. Obviously, you got to pay out some sort of severance package. The fake complaints is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, if they're making bullying harassment complaints, the company has a duty to investigate them, right? And so if it's proven they're fake, right? If it's proven that this person's making fake complaints, that's something you should definitely be disciplining them for. I mean, depending on the nature of the allegations, if they're making fake allegations of something serious, like they're saying someone's stealing, or false claims of sexual harassment or something like that. That may warrant, some of the stuff could warrant immediate termination, right? And so, Alvin, I guess to answer your question, it's what's the degree? It depends on what the degree of the misconduct is. You could some misconduct is so serious you could let them go right away, right, without any warnings. Um, some you need to kind of apply progressive discipline if you want to let them go for cause. Guys asking, employer fires you 1 week before you retire, then they unfired you. And you got a few more questions here. You were on STD at the time. Manulife cut you off, so employer fired you. So you were on STD. Okay, so Manulife's the insurer. Okay. You appealed and won. Okay. The employers closed the factory. You're employed for 34 plus years. And is it possible they will make you an offer of settlement? I don't know if I could speak to that guy. I mean, yes, it's possible they'll make you a settlement. I would come talk to me privately, guy, if you're in BC, or one of my colleagues if you're in Ontario, Alberta. It sounds like a complicated situation, because the stuff with Manulife also comes into account here. If you're still on insurance benefits, it does sometimes impact settlement with the employer and severance. Got a question from Chrissy. If an employer says they're going to sue you for breach of contract, are they allowed to withhold pay? So Chrissy, in BC, no, they cannot withhold pay unless they have your written consent, right? They can sue you for breach of contract. I don't know what they're suing you for, but no, they cannot withhold pay without your express permission. JX2, your employers emanated the position you were working under. They've offered you other positions in the company. If I were to try the new position, how should I respond to ensure my severance? I don't know that you can. I assume the employer eliminated the position you're working under. If the other positions are demotion, if they're lower paying, if they're just dramatically different than your previous position, you don't necessarily have to accept it. If you do try the new position, you accept their job offer, then I don't think there's severance pay to pursue, right? Because you still have a job, and they've essentially kind of just changed your job, and now you're employed by them in a different position. If it doesn't work out and they let you go, right, then you want to make sure that your years of service in your previous position was recognized for the purpose of severance. And so, okay, so question from Facebook. You were laid off yesterday after completing 90 days. They offered you 1 week notice period and the vacation pay. Your contract says you will get the minimum severance when you get terminated. Is 1 week a minimum severance pay for an employee like me in Alberta who is more than 90 days at work? So I'm actually not sure about Alberta. I know that 1 week is correct for BC after 3 months. Now that's the minimum though, right? Under the employment standards legislation, your severance entitlements, as I'm sure a lot of my regular viewers know, is typically a lot more than the minimum under the Employment Standards Act. But yeah, and the same thing applies in Alberta as well, right? I'm just not sure in your situation what the minimums are for someone who's been there just over 90 days in Alberta. Okay, guys. So hopefully I was able to answer most of your questions, and hopefully I was helpful in a way. I'll be back in 3 weeks. But yeah, thanks for everybody for coming, and I hope everybody stays safe in this weather we've got here.